Good morning. I'm Beth Simon, and I'm here today with Amy Hoffman and Kelly Harris. We are all program quality assessors with the PA Key. And today we'll be talking about all things ROSIE with Dr. Sandra Duncan. With over 45 years of experience in early care and education field and a doctorate in education, Dr. Duncan has extensive experience working with young children and parents, teaching at the university level, designing and writing professional development programs for practitioners, and authoring several teacher resource books, including Inspiring Spaces for Young Children and Rating Observation Scale for Inspiring Environments, or ROSIE. So as the former owner of 11 early childhood programs, Dr. Duncan has a wide and varied background in early care and education, and we're excited to have you here this morning.
Well, thank you so much. It's great to be with you.
So Dr. Duncan, can you tell us how you got the idea for the ROSIE?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I was working in the publishing industry. I worked for Scholastic Early Childhood Today magazine, also Early Childhood News magazine. I was the president of an educational publishing company. And so I kind of thought I knew a little bit about publishing. The reality was I didn't know that much about it, but I retired and kind of went into cleaning out my underwear drawers and polishing my doorknobs and things like that. And I realized, wow, retirement isn't as great as it sounded. And so I decided to call a very good friend and colleague. Her name is Lois Mitten Rosenberry. Lois at that time owned, I believe it was 6 centers. She still owns centers. But at that time, I just knew the centers in Ohio. They are called Children's Discovery Centers. And I called her up and I thought, I think maybe it's a great idea, Lois, if we write this book or a book. And she said, oh, yeah, that's a great idea, Sandra. What do you want to write it on? And so because I had owned childcare centers, she owned childcare centers, I said, well, how about multi-center, managing multi-centers? And she goes, no, I don't think so. And I said, okay, how about curriculum? Something on curriculum. And, no, I don't think so. And I just went through anything that my brain could think of as a topic for a book. And I wasn't getting anywhere with Lois. She just wasn't interested in anything. And all of a sudden, this idea struck me. What about, Lois, if we talk about classroom environments? Because I had noticed every time I had been in Lois's classrooms that they just felt different. And I couldn't really, at that point, I couldn't really put my finger on why they felt different, but they just felt different. And the whole classroom seemed to like hum, and kids weren't hanging from the chandeliers. They weren't running around. There was wonderful noise, not certainly not quiet in the classroom, but it was a wonderful kind of noise. And the children were all engaged and dispersed around the classroom. And I just said, Lois, your environments are amazing. There's something different about your environments. Children act different in your environments. They seem to be more attuned. They seem to be more engaged. They seem to be more focused. There seems to be less scuttlebutts around the classroom. And so maybe we could write a book on environments. And she said, okay. And so that was kind of how the whole Inspiring Spaces for Young Children and the rating observation scale for inspiring environments. That's sort of how it started. And so one day I drove to Ohio and we sat around her dining room table. There were 5 of us. There was Jessica Deviney, Lois's daughter, Sarah Mitten Harris, Sarah Sarah Harris, who is also Lois's daughter, and Mary Rohde, who was at the time, I believe, the CEO of Children's Discovery, or the CFO, or some title like that, very, very much involved in the operations of the centers. And so the five of us, who are the authors of Inspiring Spaces and Rosie, sat around Lois's dining room table, and we started to identify elements or characteristics of her environments. We started off with the question, well, what makes Lois's environments different than other environments, other early childhood environments? What's about Lois's environments that is distinguishes her as this is Lois's environment? So that's how we all started it. And interestingly enough, we started with Rosie. We didn't write Inspiring Spaces first. We started with writing the rating observation scale. And we probably did that because we were looking at characteristics or elements, or at that point, we didn't even call them design. We just thought about them as what makes her environments different than others. And the word color came up. Well, there's lots of neutral colors in her classroom. You don't see a lot of primary colors. The word focal point comes up because her environments are very much children's museum type environments, where it's very active interaction with large structures and large pieces of equipment, and then in the classroom, smaller pieces of equipment. And so that's how we started. And we just sat around this kitchen table and we designed these principles of design. And at the time, we didn't call them, at the very beginning, we didn't call them design. None of us had any interior design background or anything like that. So eventually they became the 7 principles of design, and that's how they were published. So that's how it all started. It all started with, we want to make children's environments special. We want to figure out how to help other teachers make children's environments special. We want environments like Lois's environments, because one can tell immediately when you walk into her environments that children are happy, they're productive, they're focused, they're competent. And we wanted environments like that. And we wanted to see if we could share with others how to perhaps make that happen. So that's how Rosie started. And after we wrote Rosie and the 7 principles of design and figured that all out, it took over a year just to figure that out. And once we figured that out, then we thought, oh my goodness, maybe we need to write a little bit about this. And so that's how Inspiring Spaces for Young Children, that's how that book was written. So Rosie came first, and then Inspiring Spaces came second.
That's wonderful. I love that story because I love how it was such a collaboration. You had the kind of the idea, the aha moment to write the book, and then you went to Lois, and Lois kind of seems like she kind of shot down your ideas, but you came to an agreed, topic, and look how wonderful that's turned out. Look at how wonderful it is, and we're so glad to have the Rosie as a choice for a POI in Pennsylvania. We're so glad that you brought it to us.
Can I interject something, Kelly?
Of course.
In the 10 years, I believe it's about 10 years since it's been published, we are all so happy about the success of this book. It's sold, I think, 40,000 copies of the book, and it's being sold around the world. And Just recently, I was at the World Forum and I met this lovely young lady, and she was from somewhere way far away from where we were in Florida. And I was talking to her about what she's doing, and she was telling me, and she goes, "So what do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I do a little bit of this and a little bit of that." And I eventually said something about, I'm the author of books on environments for young children. And she goes, "Oh, what books?" And I mentioned Inspiring Spaces. She was from an island, a small island I had never heard of, halfway around the world. And she had that book sitting on her desk. It just gave me goosebumps because I know that this book is impacting and helping teachers design wonderful, inspiring environments for young children. And I also just need to say one more thing is a lot of people say to me, "Well, you're the lady that likes pretty environments." One lady said that to me a long time ago. And it isn't about pretty environments. It even isn't about aesthetically pleasing environments. It's more about this notion of beauty. And we know now, and I didn't know when we wrote this book, I didn't know this, but beauty inspires wonder. Dr. Ruth Wilson is a wonderful proponent of how beauty encourages children and their learning and their place in the world. And I know that it's not about being pretty. It's not about being aesthetically pleasing at all. It's about creating classrooms that have beauty, because beauty increases and promotes a sense of wonder. And we do know from the research that wonder promotes lifelong learning. When children look at something that's beautiful, their eyes are engaged in it. Maybe they're holding the pine cone and they're feeling the nodules on the pine cone, and they're examining it and feeling the roughness and the cracks and the crevices, and they're observing it for a long time, and they're appreciating the beauty of it. And that beauty of that pine cone, or whatever that child is holding, that beauty promotes wonder. And wonder is absolutely the motivator for learning. Wonder, according to Piaget, he talks about disequilibrium being the motivator for learning. And disequilibrium means I have this kumquat in my hand and I don't know what this kumquat is. I need to figure out where to put it in my mental schemas. So they start wondering about it. They start thinking about it. They start examining it and observing it and feeling it and touching it and perhaps even tasting it. But that disequilibrium is, I don't know what that kumquat is. That is the motivator for learning. A lot of motivation for learning can be caused and promoted through beauty, and especially the beauty of nature. So I just wanted to add that in there because I think it's an important part of your work when you work with your classrooms and of your work with young children.
Absolutely. Yeah, we really focus on that child development. And like you said, having the children use their imagination and thinking about those things in nature and making sure that children get those experiences on a regular basis. So that's super important in programs, especially here in Pennsylvania. So thank you. So looking at the principles of design, we see that you focus on 7 different principles, and we're not going to go over all of those today, but I picked out 2. Could you tell us why you chose color and why you chose texture?
Okay, why don't we talk about texture first? Because
Okay.
I just talked about that idea of pine cone. Early childhood classrooms, if you think about your classroom right now, just maybe close your eyes and imagine it. how much texture is in your classroom? Now, since COVID, probably even less. You can open up your eyes if you have them closed, but since COVID, probably even less. But hopefully we're going to go beyond COVID. But as you thought about that classroom, the reality is our classrooms are pretty institutional. The surfaces are easily cleanable, and they need to be at some point. Um, but the shelves are easily cleanable, but our classrooms are fairly institutional. And by institutional, I mean hard surfaces, little texture. And let me talk for just a moment about the hard surface of plastic. Plastic is, first of all, plastic steals beauty. And we just talked about the importance of beauty in a classroom. Plastic steals beauty. Why does it steal beauty? It steals visual beauty and it steals kinesthetic beauty. And by that, I mean, visually, if you look at a piece of plastic, pretty much it's a hard surface. Pretty much it's a flat surface, unless it's a toy that's been molded into a shape. But pretty much it's smooth, right? So plastic has no visual or kinesthetic texture. So when you look at plastic, it's pretty smooth. So there's no visual texture going on. There's no depths to when you look at, for example, you look at there's a bush right behind me. When you look at that bush, there's cracks and crevices. There's shadows and light. There's a lot of different kinds of textures when you look at that bush behind me. There's also kinesthetic textures when you feel that bush. You can feel the leaves that feel different than the branches that feel different than the dirt that it's planted in. There's lots of opportunities for kinesthetic texture in something natural, but there isn't visual opportunities for plastic. Plastic is the robber or the stealer or the culprit of stealing beauty from our classrooms. So that's one of the reasons why we put texture as one of our principles, because we know that visual and kinesthetic texture helps children with their skills in reading readiness. So for example, if you think back to that pine cone example, a child holds a pine cone in his hand, he can feel the difference in the textures. He can also observe. And because he's wondering about that pine cone, he's thinking about that pine cone, he observes it longer. Children that have texture in their classrooms or have opportunities for texture in their lives become better observers. And becoming a better observer of life, no matter what it is, what color eyes do I have? Unless you're a good observer, you might not notice. I think they're blue, right? But becoming a good observer helps children become better readers. Why? Because good observers can look at a lowercase b and a lowercase d and understand that they are different. Understand that that lowercase b looks different than the lowercase d. Observation is a huge part of reading readiness skills. So to get back to the idea of texture, we want to include texture into our classrooms because it helps with the institutional feel of the classroom. It gives softness to the classroom. It gives visual depth to the classroom. It gives kinesthetic depth to the classroom. And that in turn promotes readiness skills that are important for young children. And you didn't have to lift up a pencil and have the child write the lowercase b on a mimeograph. sheet. You didn't, or ditto sheet or whatever your worksheet or whatever they're called nowadays, but you didn't have to put a pencil in a child's hand and make him trace the lowercase b and the lowercase c, which does absolutely nothing to help children with readiness. But you are instilling into your classroom opportunities for children to experience visual depth, kinesthetic depth with their eyes and with their hands. And those two things promote reading readiness skills.
So it sounds like from what you're saying that children who have frequent interactions with nature have an increase in academic success.
Yes, yes. And the reason why it's an increase in academic success is because number one, nature is open-ended. Children can do with nature pretty much wherever their imagination takes them. We know that imagination is important in academics. It's important to be able to imagine. It's important to be able to create. It's important to be able to put things together, put two things together and create something new. Like for example, in concoctions, I can put the mud together with the flower petals and I can make this great concoction. Does that seem like a great sensory experience? Absolutely. It does seem like a great sensory experience, but it also shows children how things can combine together to make something new. Where does that relate to reading readiness? Well, one example could be when you put letters together, they form a word. When you put words together, they form a sentence. When you put sentences together, they form a paragraph. When you put paragraph, and it goes on and on and on. So just the mere idea of doing concoctions is not just scientific, it's not just sensory experiences, it's a whole lot more if you really start to think about it from a different perspective.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that. Can you tell us how spending time in nature can be a form of self-care?
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, anybody that knows me knows I'm a great proponent of nature. In fact, right after this interview in a few minutes, I'm going to go with my granddaughter who's out from school and we're going strawberry picking and then to a farmer's market. So I love being outdoors and I know that spending time outside for both adults and children and watching a sunset, going strawberry picking. I got up early this morning and the sun's up and I'm looking out my window and I'm watching the birds and then the ducks coming up on my yard and a chipmunk going across it and the birds flying and a squirrel and a blue heron. And I'm just watching nature. And when I got up, I was feeling a little bit tense. I had a little bit of stressful evening. My husband has Parkinson's, and so it's always a challenge. When I got up, I looked out the window and I watched for probably 20 minutes. And I just had to watch. I didn't have to go out outside in it. I just had to watch. And I immediately, after those few minutes, felt more relaxed, felt more in tune with myself, felt ready to start my day. And so I know personally I'm influenced by nature, but we also have research that tells us, absolutely tells us that that humans are better off when they spend time in nature. One research study comes to mind, and it was a study about hospital patients that were in this hospital. And all things being equal, after surgery, some patients were, they monitored what some patients did in one room that faced a parking lot, and they monitored what some patients did in other rooms that faced a park. And so what they found out, and of course it was a lot more scientific than I'm talking about right now, but what they found out that the patients who had the park view healed faster, had required less pain medication, and there were a whole variety of other things that happened that for the better of the patients with the hospital view. So, and we have office studies, productivity in offices, in office environments that either have a view of the outside or have plenty of plants and natural items in the office itself, the biophilic design approach. They are more productive, they feel more at home, there's better collaboration. So we have, if you just go out and look and Google it, we have the research that says you're better off when you include nature in your life. But what I really wanted to talk to you about as an educator is an idea that I recently came across, and it's called ART, A-R-T. And art isn't about paintbrushes or paper or crayons or any scissors or anything like that. Art is actually an acronym for attention restorative theory. And it was developed by Rachel and Stephen Kaplan, both doctors of, I believe, psychology. And when I learned about this attention restorative theory, I thought, aha, I get it now. I really get it. Because for years I've been saying, just like I just said a few minutes ago, go outside, experience nature, walk in the grass barefooted, go to the beach, walk in the sand, feel the breeze. I've talked about this forever and just relied on the theory that I'd been reading about that, yeah, it's good for you. Okay, it's good for me. Let's go out and do it. But Dr. Kaplan's, the two Dr. Kaplan's, made me think about it in a different way. This is what they say. As teachers and as educators, we have a very physically and mentally demanding job. It's very mentally and physically challenging to work with a group of 2-year-olds for a day. It's hard, it's not easy, and we want the best for our children. So we are always on what Kaplan calls direct attention. We are focused on those children. We're focused on our environment. We're focused on our curriculum. We're focused on what we're going to do that day. We're focused. And all that direct focus on our brain causes mental fatigue. It starts in our brain and it causes this mental fatigue. And that mental fatigue causes us to get frail and causes us to maybe splinter and crack a little bit because we are so focused and we have so much direct attention on the job that we're doing because we want to get it right. So what Kaplan has made me realize is that with all that direct attention, we need to give our brain a vacation. We need to give our brain a rest. And what he says is we must have like what he calls soft fascinations or indirect attention. And so when we go outside, like I've been preaching about for years, not really understanding, but when we go outside and like I did this morning, I watch the birds, or we go outside and we watch the clouds flutter by or fly by or pass by, or we watch the waves on the lake, or we feel the breeze on our face. All of a sudden, our mind has gone on a little brief vacation. We are in indirect attention. These soft fascinations have caused us to allow our brain to regroup, to revitalize itself, and to recoup. And when we go out and have this indirect attention, what he calls ART, attention restorative therapy or theory, what happens is because we're out there, because our brain is resting, it gives our brain a chance to revitalize itself. And by revitalizing itself, then we're ready to come back in the classroom, and we're ready to go because we've been pumped full of good energies. We've allowed our brain a little chance to rest. And now, because we've given it a rest, it's just like having a good night's sleep. Because we've given it a rest, we're ready to go back to all that direct attention that teaching demands.
I think that's wonderful. I don't think there's a single childcare provider out there that would listen to this recording and not think that totally hits home for them, right? That what you're saying is that brain's direct attention. Yes, you want the best for your classroom, so you're always so focused on that. But just like you said, going outside into nature, even if it's just for a few minutes, your 15-minute break in the morning, your half an hour lunch, that you can get back to revitalizing yourself. And I think that point hits home for so many providers, especially over the past 2 years.
Yeah.
So important.
I have one thing. I always have one thing to add after.
Absolutely, please.
After I stop talking, I'm reading this book. It's called Joyful, and I forgot something about getting happiness out of ordinary things. Or and the author is Lee, L-E-E, is his last name. And the main book title is Joyful. It's got a bunch of bubbles or circles on the cover. It's a book about really interior design, and it's a book about how to make. It's written for helping you be happy with what you have. And there was one thing in there that just like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe this. What she suggested as a preface to this, though, we know from the research that our brain likes curves better than it likes angles. So think about that in your classroom design, how many angles you have versus curves. But our brain is more receptive to curves. It enjoys curves a lot more than it enjoys angles of anything. And so one of the things she suggested, and I was like astounded, she said, look around your home. Do you have plants? The answer to that for me was, I have, it's like a little greenery in my house. I have lots of plants. She says, okay, now look at the shape of the petals of the plants. I looked around and, oh my goodness, okay, yeah, they're all kind of like pointed, or, they're spiky kind of looking. They're angular kinds of leaves on the plants, on the plant leaves. She goes, you need to go out and buy I think it's called a dollar plant or a money plant. I don't know which, but you can Google it and you'll find it. But a dollar plant or a money plant has curved, round leaves. They're just charming little circle leaves. And so I went out and bought a money plant. Let's pretend it's called a money, could be $1. But I went out and bought this money plant and I put it right by my desk. And I don't know if it's because this lady told me I'd feel happy when I looked at the plant that had the circular leaves, or if I really look at the circular leaves and the circular leaves makes me feel happy. Regardless, every time I look at that plant, I love it. I feel joyful. So if you can, go out and find a money plant or a dollar plant, whichever it's called, and put it in your classroom. Make sure it's not toxic. I really haven't looked that up, but at the very least, put it in your home because it's a wonderful plant. It's easy to grow and it will make you happy.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. I love plants as well. And I'm thinking, as you're talking, I'm thinking about all the things I have, and mine are pointy plant. I have succulents and I have an aloe plant, which has pointy leaves. And I'm thinking about those things. I'm thinking, I don't have any with round sleeves. So thank you. I will look for one of those. So the last question we have for you today is, what are some simple strategies that you could suggest to help teachers to start to use the ROSIE in their classroom?
I like that question. Well, first of all, let me preface it with, I've virtually helped hundreds of teachers with the ROSIE in the time since it's been published. One of the things I learned early on was the idea of Rome wasn't built in a day, and your classroom isn't going to be changed in a day. So everything takes time. Good things take time. So the first thing is to not lower your expectations, but think about not doing everything all at once. Think about the idea of maybe looking at the principles and looking at the 7 principles and which one interests you the most? Which one are you most fascinated about? Because I talked about texture today, are you fascinated about texture? Or maybe you've heard a little bit about how primary colors might not be the best thing to have a lot of primary colors in your classroom. Maybe that's where you want to start with the color principle. Or maybe you've been thinking about your walls, and perhaps there might be too much on your walls, or there might be too many commercial posters on your walls, and you want to figure out a way to make your walls more useful and beneficial for children. Maybe that's what you want to do. Think about perhaps what interests you the most of each of the principles and begin there. That's one idea. Another idea could be begin with principle 1 because it's nature inspires beauty. That's probably one of the, I don't want to say easiest because that doesn't sound right to me, but it's probably one of the most, the greatest way to find success in a short period of time with not a lot of investment. Because, and it's not to say that you have to invest in all of these principles, and not to say that at all, but nature is right outside your door, right? So you don't have to go far. You don't have to maybe search around for a little stool or something that you want to put in your classroom and go to a garage sale or whatever. You don't have to do that. You can just go right outside your door and get some nature. And so nature might be a good one to start because it's the foundation actually of ROSIE is everything. And again, when we wrote this book, did we really think that nature would be the foundation of the book? Probably not. But now I know absolutely for sure that it is the foundation of all of our classroom design. Nature and natural elements in the classroom is the absolute best way to create an environment for young children where they can just be children and where they don't have to lose their childhood through one-use toys, gadgets, push buttons, screens, and whatever. Nature is the best way to do that. Nature is our best teacher. So you could start with principle 1. Or you could do the whole ROSIE, and then at the back, you have learned, or you probably will learn, is that you'll find out, oh, here's the principles that you're doing pretty good at, but here's some principles that maybe you need some help with. And so you could think, all right, I'm going to carry out the principle that I'm doing pretty good at, and I'm going to kind of get to where I think I want to be with that principle, and then I'm going to go on to perhaps a harder one. Or maybe you like to be challenged by something that you're not doing as good as you think you should be doing. So you could do it that way. whatever you do, or another thing you could do is you could start with a principle and start with one indicator. There are at least 2 living things in the classroom, and start with one indicator. And when you've got that one done, go to the next indicator. So there's no right or wrong answer, really. There's absolutely no right or wrong answer. Do it however it makes you feel good, because if you don't feel good about doing this, you're not going to do it. You're just not going to do it. It's just like a diet, I'm going to start my diet on Monday, and good intentions go aside because you don't start your diet on Monday because there was, a banana split like I had last night with my granddaughter. So, you have to do it. You have to be you and do it the way it best works out for you. Just do it so you feel comfortable with it, and so you keep it up, because I have heard from so many teachers that say, I now have the 7 principles pretty well in hand in my classroom. I've decluttered my classroom. My classroom has natural materials in it. I have a focal point. I have texture. I have my walls look great. I have so many elements of the principles of design in my classroom, and I can't tell you how different I feel at the end of the day. And I can't tell you how different the children are in my classroom versus last year when I didn't have this. Now, I'm just going to give a caveat to this. I've been in lots and lots of situations. This is what I do for my profession. Is I'll go in to classrooms and we will tear it apart and bring everything out into the hall, and we will start over with a clean palette, and we will completely transform a classroom in a day. So I know what that's like too, and I know I can watch the children on Friday, and then on Saturday we come in and do this overhaul, and then on Monday I come back and I watch the children. I can see dramatic differences in children, dramatic differences in how they interact with the environment. So you could do it whole hog, so to speak. And if you do it whole hog, one suggestion is to first, before you even start the process, like on a Saturday, is to declutter, go on a purge, get rid of things that you haven't looked at or put your hands on in a year or even 5 months. Purge out, declutter your classroom, and then let's say it's on a Saturday, and have people there to help you, and don't just do it by yourself because it's major undertaking. Have some people there to help you. Make it a learning session, and before you even start, look at your classroom and think about what's not working here. What do you wish for this classroom? What do you want to see for this classroom? Where do you want your children to be in this classroom? How do you want them to interact in this classroom? Then once you've done all that pre-stuff, take everything off the wall, everything down from the ceilings, and move all the furniture, if you can, on a Saturday, all out into the hall. Every stitch of furniture that you can move it out into the hall, and then come in and stand and look at this empty classroom. You will be amazed at your perspective in looking at the classroom. You might be able to see the sunlight coming in from the window and on the floor, and you think to yourself, oh my goodness, could I have a light experience here? Could I have a light and shadow experience? Is this a good place for the science corner? Is this a great place for the black corner? Because I know the light coming in on the rug will create different effects for children. You will see your classroom in an entirely different way. And most of the time, I'd say almost 100% of the time, teachers say, oh my goodness, my classroom is so big because all your stuff is out. And as you put things back into the classroom, always think about the 7 principles of design. Always think about balancing your classroom and making sure that you don't have too much furniture. Think about every single piece of furniture that you put back in your classroom and think to yourself, does that piece of furniture have a purpose? Or if it's a large footprint piece of furniture, think to yourself, if it's this really large bookshelf that takes up lots of kids' foot space, could I maybe do away with that and instead of that large piece of a bookshelf where children that's the space where we read because the bookshelf's there. No, maybe you could have mini spaces to read because you have baskets of books. Or the latest trend is, and I'm sure you guys might be doing this, is basket of books in every single learning center that relate to the learning center, like a basket of books about construction or the Eiffel Tower or trucks or whatever in the black corner, books about cooking and food and things in the home living center. So you still have a quiet center, maybe not a big bookshelf, but maybe a basket of books or a wall shelf, a hanging wall shelf. Always think about every piece of furniture and do I need that big piece of furniture or could I make a smaller footprint and thereby free up space for children? Part of our issue, and the number one thing I've learned with Rosie and designing classrooms is we make our classrooms too crowded with furniture and it doesn't give children opportunities to navigate the classroom and to see what's there and to enjoy what's there and to understand what's there for them, because we've got our children all in little contained areas where they can't really see in. Once they're in, they can't really see out because we have all these shelving units and we have way too many shelving units, I've found. And once you get rid of 1 or 2 shelving units, once you get rid of 1 or 2 big piece items, another big piece item is that hanging clothes. You know, you hang up the dramatic clothes on that big piece. Just measure out how much square foot the base of that is taking up. Could you instead get a 3 dresser, an end table for a bed and buy it at a garage sale and it's got 3 drawers in it and put your dress up clothes in the drawers? Could you do that? Maybe. Could you get a basket with a cover on it and put them all in there, and just something that doesn't take up as much visual space and floor space? So the idea would be take everything out of your classroom. When you put it back in with intention. Everything has a purpose and everything is placed for a reason. And that will help you tremendously if you're going to go, transform your classroom in 24 hours kind of thing.
It sounds like teachers have a lot of options there, which is great. Because like you said, some programs probably would want to do that whole hog approach that you were just talking about. And then some will need to start much more slowly. And like you said, pick an indicator or pick a principle and just start there. So I think that that's some wise advice. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Duncan, thank you so very much for taking time to chat with us today. It's always just a delight to hear from you and to hear and see your passion for what you do and to see your passion for inspiring classroom environments. I think that that's amazing. So to our friends.
Can I just tell you one thing? I'm
Please.
sorry. I need to tell you all that's listening, I've heard people say, I'm not a designer, I don't watch those design shows. I don't buy design magazines. I'm a teacher. I'm an educator. I'm not a designer. And I've heard that many, many times. I'm here to tell you, you know, before I made that phone call to Lois Minton Rosenberry, I wasn't a designer either. I knew nothing about designing. But what I know now today is environments are the third teacher, as Reggio says. Environments are so important, and they impact children. They impact us all, but they really impact children in so many ways, physically, emotionally, cognitively. They impact children. And what you do in your environment is important. And we cannot be robbing children of their childhood by creating environments that do not help them keep their childhood. So it's important what you do. It's really, really important. And it's not just a pretty environment. It's an environment where children can grow and flourish. And it's a matter, in my estimation, can children survive in environments that are filled with color and pattern and overwhelming materials and clutter? And can they survive in that? Yeah, they can survive. Absolutely. I mean, kids have been surviving for years in chaotic environments. But can they thrive? I'd say no. What we need to do is we need kids to thrive, not just survive. And by instilling the 7 principles of design, you can begin to help design an environment that helps children thrive. There, I've said my last piece. I got on my last bandwagon. I'm done.
You are welcome to say all that you want. The environment as a teacher is such a vital, vital concept. And I thank you for bringing that out. Also, I wanted to let everybody know who's listening that we do have this fantastic handout that Dr. Duncan shared with us with the 7 principles of design. And we will be linking that to this. So you'll be able to find, if you found this webinar, I mean, if you found this recording, you're going to be able to find that handout. It will all be together. So everything, it's kind of a 1-page document, but well, it is a 1-page document to help you out. But for our friends here in Pennsylvania, the ROSIE, the Rating Observation Scale for Inspiring Environments, is one of the program observation instruments that Keystone Stars, the standards allow you to use in your classroom. So why don't you check it out? This would be a great year for you to check it out. You can reach out to any member of the program quality assessment team. If you don't know how to get a hold of us, talk to your quality coach. They have our numbers. So we would absolutely love to hear from you and to hear how implementation of the ROSIE is going in your program. Also, check out the book, Inspiring Spaces for Young Children. It's fantastic. It has so many great visuals in it and just a lot of really inspirational ideas for you to actually just put into place in your classroom. So yeah, be sure to check those things out.
Go to my website too. I have a website and there's all sorts of resources there. It's just www.sandraduncan.com, and there's lots of recordings and different things that I've done for other people that you can listen to if you're interested.
Fantastic. So again, friends, check that out. www.sandraduncan, SANDRADUNCAN.com. Thank you again for joining us today. We hope that all of you are having a great day and that you are able to just dive right in and work on creating some inspiring environments in your classrooms.
Thank you.